Thank you, everybody. We're going to shift gears a little bit from building a brand and connecting with your customers to connecting with your customers on an economic level. And so a little bit of a shift from what Lenore was talking about. First off, how many people here run a cash-only business? Are there any merchants here? Okay. Not a lot of audience participation. I had a couple other questions. I don't know if, and then you get a group of people that run a mix of cash and credit card businesses. And then you have people that, like us, that may run a credit card only business, which is a very, very small minority. But what I found is how many people have actually calculated what it costs to take cash. Everyone knows what their merchant banking costs. Everyone sees that line item on their P&L. They know what it costs for them to take credit cards. But they don't actually look at what it takes to take cash. And so I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about our experience and then how that ties into it. We operate 6 restaurants in San Francisco and 2 in Los Angeles under the Mixt Greens and Split Bread brands. And when we were looking to launch Split Bread about 2 years ago, we really started thinking about what was important to us. And what we said was, how do we create an even better customer experience? How do we get the customers to interact, not just with us, because now we've got 8 restaurants. How do we get them to interact with our cashiers and our servers and our staff and our chefs in a way that's very meaningful, like Lenore said, and in a way that continues that? How do we get rid of some of those barriers? And we wanted to create a really amazing customer experience. And as we started thinking through what that customer experience was, we kept coming back to one piece, which was the transaction. No matter what, people really don't like taking cash out of their wallet or credit card. They don't like parting with their money. So how do we create a better experience there? How do we make this something that they like doing? And we looked at it and we said, we need to streamline this. We need to make it more fluid. We need to reduce the friction. And as we analyzed it, we realized that cash really was the friction point there. That every time somebody took there were a lot of different things, and we'll get into them. But we wanted our staff to focus on the customer. So we said, you know what? Let's try something really, really extreme, and let's get rid of cash when we open Split Bread. And we were the first restaurant in the country to do this. Very few businesses actually try it, and we've stuck with it. And it's done a lot of different things. First, you find that all of your retail design is designed around protecting a till. So you have a lot of flawed retail design. You create this big counter with a big cash register and a monitor, and the person stands behind it. And now you've got an impediment to your human interaction. Somebody's standing back here. I can't talk to them nicely. I can't have a free conversation. And the Apple Store really changed everyone's thinking on this. If you walk into an Apple Store, their retail success really hinges on the fact that people can walk around freely. They can talk to you. They can take your credit card. They can even walk over to the product on the aisle rather than standing behind a register and pointing. We've designed stores and retail and restaurant environments, especially in quick service, in a way that protected the cash register. You need to man it. You need to keep somebody there, and you need to make sure that it's a point where people come, rather than an employee coming up to you and talking to you. So by eliminating cash, we were able to totally change the design of what we were doing. We were able to create podiums, because you still need somewhere to place an order, but we created podiums that we could move around the store depending on what the needs of the store were that day, depending on how the flow was. And during the busier times or the less busy times, our staff can walk around and talk to customers, and they don't need to worry about, hey, I need to be here at this till. I need to watch this. I need to guard over this. And when you break that down, your staff then becomes friendlier because they don't have this barrier that they get to stand behind. So they lose that wall as well, and it breaks it down with your customers. The second thing, cash really isn't clean. It's not something, especially in a restaurant environment. And you don't want your servers touching it. You don't want your customers touching it. There's a chain out of South Africa called Nando's, and they do something very interesting. In their front of house, in their service area, in their customer areas, they have sinks. And a lot of it is so that you can wash your hands. But people don't realize how dirty cash really is, and this is a little side to my conversation because it's a personal pet peeve, but some NYU researchers, I need to read my notes on this, did the first genetic testing of $1 bills. They found 3,000 types of bacteria. Acne, gastric ulcers, pneumonia, food poisoning, staph infections. They found white rhino DNA, which is a near extinct species, on bills. It's just, you don't want to touch it. So that, for me, I looked and said, hey, that's kind of neat. If we get rid of that, that eliminates something, you don't want to, you don't even want to think about it. So it's a neat little side effect for us that, hey, it keeps it a little bit cleaner. The third point, and this is where it really hit home, is that cash is not free. Now, this doesn't necessarily scale. There's some fixed costs involved in this, but what everyone is seeing in retail is you're accepting less and less cash, right? You don't accept that much anymore. This number is actually about 3 months old for me, and we're down, our credit card, we're down at lower than 20% now on cash on Mixt Greens, and it's dropping on a regular basis. So what happens is, as you accept less and less cash, the fixed costs associated with taking it stay there. And there are a lot of things that people don't realize. So the bottom line is cash is not free. And we can walk through this. The first thing, loss. No matter how good you are, no matter how accurate your cashiers are, no matter how good and honest everyone is, you're going to have some loss. The next thing, store reconciliation. And this was a huge one for us. You end up with cash, counting it in the mornings. Then you count it in midday. And then you count it out at the end of the day. And then you have a manager reconcile that cash. And then you have somebody deposit that cash. And what you did was you took the most expensive employee in your retail establishment, your manager, and you had them doing absolutely nothing related to your business. You had them counting cash, the most menial task that you have. They didn't talk to your customers. They weren't supervising their staff. They weren't making sure that things were clean. They weren't making sure that quality was good. They were taking care of cash. And the expense on that line, beyond their hourly wage, they're not paying attention to what you care about the most. And that was the point that really hit home for us, was when we take cash, I have to take the most valuable asset in my establishment and put them in charge of something that I really don't even need to be there. Then we get into corporate reconciliation. At the end of the day, after I've counted the cash, after I've deposited it in the bank, somebody still needs to look at it on the back end and make sure it went to the bank correctly. And then it went into our books correctly. And inevitably, it doesn't happen like that every day of the year at every store. So then there's a phone call. Then there's an email. Hey, what happened? Oh, it was just a typo. And that all adds up. For us, we run a business that depends on throughput. Moving customers through our store is really important. Getting those customers through effectively, getting them through happily, really important. Cash transactions take significantly longer than credit card transactions. And I don't want this to sound like a plug for Visa or these credit card people, but it really is amazing. You take a credit card transaction, you're at 5-6 seconds, in and out, on the swipe, they're gone. A lot of times people leave before the before the receipt is even printed, and it's done. Cash, even with things like coin dispensers, takes time. So we have, by the time you bring it in, people fumble with their wallet, they count it out. Inevitably, somebody wants to make sure that they give you 61 cents so that they get 40 cents back, and rather than 39 cents back, or whatever it is, and it slows everything down. So all of this adds up. Our cost of cash on this example, and this really, you got to realize this doesn't, if you scale, it doesn't necessarily hold true, but we're accepting so little cash now, those fixed costs stay the same. $51 to take the cash for the day versus a credit card, if you took all credit card on that, would be $6.60 by the time you pay your merchant banking fees. It's a big difference. And it's a big difference when it comes to some of those other factors like I talked about, like store design and your credit and your cleanliness. The other thing that was really interesting was once we got rid of cash at Split Bread, we realized we could do a lot of other things because there wasn't this anticipation that I can pay cash. It's pay with a credit card or you do some kind of alternative payment. So what we do here, and we'll just go through this slide quickly, we have QR codes on the tables that allow people to scan the QR code, they place their order, they pay right there, and the food is brought right to their table. No human interaction necessary. Some people like it, some don't, but it's done some interesting things with our order totals. You find that people spend about $1.20 more when they're paying directly that way. When that friction point is gone, when they're not talking to somebody, when they have some time to sit down and look at what they're doing, they order fries, they order a drink, they do things a little bit differently. So because we got rid of cash, we got rid of that anticipation that I can pay cash, and I was able to do some interesting things there. We also saw that these customers were much more frequent visitors, which added a fair amount to the bottom line on an annualized basis. So these were all things that fell out of the cash discussion for us. Now, the first question I always get is, but people had to go nuts. They had to complain. They had to say something. How can you not take cash? And I think that we've had about 6 people in 18 months actually say something. The most hilarious was that it wasn't patriotic. I didn't realize that taking a bill was a patriotism statement. And then we get, everything down the line, and there are some legitimate concerns. You get the jogger that came in that didn't happen to take their credit card and they have some cash. So we do have some petty cash on hand to handle some customer service issues. But predominantly, what we get is if people don't want to use credit cards, we take a debit card, comes right out of their bank account, just like cash, works the same way. And what we've been able to tell people that has resonated is, you buy food on an airline, if you purchase from Amazon, you're paying with a credit card. You don't have the option to pay with cash. And most people are totally okay with that. We don't really have an issue. So there hasn't been any backlash, there hasn't been any negative customer sentiment. People have accepted it. So what can you do to figure out if this is something that makes sense for you? The first thing is to really analyze and understand your merchant banking bill. Understand what you're paying for your credit card, and understand what makes up that credit card transaction. So understand what your average check volumes are. Understand how many tickets you're doing. Understand if that's skewed because you may have a couple very large transactions and dozens of small transactions. Figure out what that breakdown is, and then understand how that bill is broken down for merchant banking. The first thing you'll find is that interchange, that's in there. You're not getting rid of that. Visa takes their money right off the top. You can't get rid of that. But then beyond that, there are a lot of people trying to get involved in this business, and there are a lot of middlemen. And you know what? As small business owners, you can beat them up, and you can price shop it, and you can find somebody, because at the end of the day, they're processing your credit cards. And there's a service element, and there's a customer service element. But you can look for better and better and better, and really get to understand it, because you can shave money off. If you have a high Amex volume, the fixed rates at some of the squares and things like that can actually be very good. If not, look for other ways to get your volume down. Understand how it breaks down with the middlemen and what they're actually adding on to each piece. And ultimately, understand what it costs for your cash. Put that in your mind that just because I'm taking cash right now doesn't mean that it's necessarily free. Just because it comes in and I don't actually have a P&L line for it, look at how much time you spend dealing with the cash and what that does to your customer experience and how that trickles down. And really just look at a way to make the system more efficient for you is the bottom line there. So thank you very much, and I'll turn this back over to Neil.